Welcome back, our dear viewers. As we have promised at the beginning of the show, that today we are going to take you back in history and we are going to talk about the army in ancient Egypt. We have been discussing this issue for several episodes, and now we'll take you to know about the army during the time of the late families at the ancient Egyptian times. And to shed more light on that topic, we are very much delighted to have our dear guest in the studio, Mr. Samir Abbas, the Egyptologist and tour guide. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, just to review quickly, we've discussed the various pharaonic dynasties. We talked about and kingdom. We talked about the army in the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and in the New Kingdom, we've reached up to Ramses III, which we've discussed the idea of using the navy. We've discussed the invasion of the sea people and the scenes on the Habu Temple reflecting the battle scenes on the sea. Now that would bring us to almost the late to almost period, or the intermediate period, the third intermediate period, and almost the 23rd dynasty onwards. So now, did the army change during that era? And to what extent and how did we face, because that's an era that was marked by several foreign invasions as well. So would you tell us, please, more about that period?
Okay, first of all, when you speak about the army changes, the army policy changes, that is our key point to talk about the collapse in ancient Egypt. Not just in the army, but there was a collapse in the ancient Egyptian civilization as well. And one of the setbacks of the study of civilizations. So many of the national historians, they will give more attention for studying the glory and the golden age, and they will not talk they will talk in briefly about the collapse, which is the collapse, from my understanding, is even study that intensively is more important than the glory period, so we can avoid such mistakes. There was terrible mistakes happens and setbacks happens during the late ancient Egyptian period of Egyptian history, and because of that, the Egyptian army and the Egyptian civilization collapsed, and that's what we will talk about today. Starting from your point, the changes. So, the army in the 18th dynasty, that was the glory time, we talked about that in details, we will not cover that again, but one of the most important strategy of the 18th dynasty kings and army leaders is not just to invade with army, no, is to create a culture and religious bias in the countries they invade and they control in the favor of the Egyptian people. I will give you an example. Thutmose III, when he made it to the Middle East and conquered all over the Middle East, he used to adapt the eldest sons of the leaders of the tribes, bring them to Egypt, raise them as his sons in the ancient Egyptian palace, in his own palace, dressed like an ancient Egyptians, taught the ancient Egyptian language, and they ended up being Egyptianized. When he sent them back home, they ruled in the Egyptian favor. So in Nubia, all of the temples, the ancient Egyptian temples built in Nubia, that was built to promote the ancient Egyptian religion in Nubia and to create a culture biased to Egypt. And that's how the Egyptian civilization lost it for the 18th and 19th dynasty, based on that it's native ruler in their own homelands, but they already ruling for the Egyptian pharaohs. This became completely different in the late period. It's in the late period, as you mentioned, there was lots of invasions, and there was lots of rulers not coming from Egyptian backgrounds. It's more specified the Libyans, So, there is more specified the Libyans. So the illustration on the screen now is for Alexander. We will talk about that later on. But Alexander, he is one of the very famous leaders who invaded Egypt in the 4th century BC. And from that time, Egypt was under the control of the Greeks, Macedonians, other were Ptolemies. From Ptolemy I, Alexander and Ptolemy I, a general Alexander army, all the way to Cleopatra VII, which is the famous one. So, and during, there was different foreign invasions. There was Libyans ruled in Egypt. There was Nubians ruled in Egypt. There was Assyrians ruled in Egypt. There was Babylonians ruled in Egypt as well. And their main focus in this period is two things. First, to dismantle the Egyptian army because they don't want resistance. Second, to corrupt the ancient Egyptian temples so they can create priests and religious leaders, which is corrupted they speak in their favor when they are paid well.
No, but it's worth mentioning that the Nubian dynasty is considered an Egyptian dynasty of liberation. So would you tell us more about that?
So that's the Nubian dynasty is an exception, and more specified, you are talking about the 25th,
dynasty 25th.
the 25th dynasty,
yeah, because that's
the 8th century
between
BC,
that era
the
of
8th century BC.
invasion.
So, you know, do you know why the Nubians, you know, so they decided to lead the Nubian army to liberate Egypt from the Libyans? Because of the investments which has happened in the 18th dynasty and the 19th dynasty to promote for the ancient Egyptian religion in the Nubian lands. Abu Simbel temple, when it was built to promote to the ancient Egyptian religion in Nubian land, and the same temples in Jabal Barkal, which is in the heart of Sudan, which is known in Karima today. And even when the Libyan kings, so when they invaded Luxor, and they persecuted and tortured priests there, they escaped to Jabal Barkal in the heart of Sudan, and they led religious reformers there, and as a result we have a generation of native Nubian kings wearing like an ancient Egyptians, and that led the Nubian army to liberate Egypt exactly as you mentioned. So, and they have no personal intentions of invading or taking the wealth of the country. But shortly after that, it was the Assyrians, completely different story, and the Babylonians after that. Then we came to a native king, which is one that he was trying so hard to bring Egypt civilization back again, which is Nectanebo. And the illustration or the photograph on the screen now is one of his achievements, one of the big gates of Karnak temple, considered the biggest ever
But
Egyptian
why
temple.
did he start to build these gates, Dr. Abbas?
That's a very good question, actually. So gates, temples, obelisks is a media in ancient Egypt. How you know that this king is a powerful king? How you know how? It is like the Statue of Liberty. It is like the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria. It is like very big landmarks, like the Eiffel Tower, like the Great Pyramid as well. That's a way to show themselves as a great kings and encourage people to build their civilization back again. It is like the American in the 1960s when they have the first mission landing on the moon to attract attention that there is a new era and a strong era. And that was media in ancient Egypt, and that's why he built not only temples and gates in Karnak, he built also his images actually come from Siwa Oasis. He made all the way to Siwa, and he built the temple there. Unfortunately, the temple is in a great ruins now, and the unfinished obelisk, which is still lays in the quarry in Aswan. That's most probably it is 42 meters height, the same height of the new gate or the newest gate in Karnak, and most probably that was cut in order to be erected there.
Now, that would lead us to the Greek era, because after that we have a Persian invasion, but then Alexander the Great came to Egypt, and now the army during the Greek era and the Ptolemaic era was totally different than what we were used to. And I think that now we can use your photographs, so please, if you can start running the photographs, that would be great. Yes.
Sure. So in the army during the late period, not just the Greeks, and even before the Greeks, even the time of Nectanebo and the dynasty 23, 24, 26, dynasty 13 more specified, that was mainly built from mercenaries, mainly Greeks and Macedonians. And they have been paid with coins. That was the first coins ever made in Egypt. I put a picture for a coin, which is the first coin out of gold ever made in Egypt, and written hieroglyphics on it, Nefer Nub, which is a good gold. So they refused to take take bread, oil, fish, and ducks, like trading, like the ancient Egyptian soldier, and that's why coins was introduced. So after a long period of foreign invasions and foreign kings ruling Egypt, dismantling the Egyptian army, that's why Nectanebo, he found it is difficult to face a new invasion without mercenaries, which is that's why he used mercenaries in that time, and that opened the door wide for the Greek invasion after that, because they were more loyal for those who would pay more to them. And there is also corruption, that's also a very important thing when it comes to the collapse of the Egyptian army and the Egyptian civilization in general. there was a very strong corruption in the ancient Egyptian temples. The ancient Egyptian temples, as we know, it was very much connected with politics and the king in ancient Egypt. The king, he was the center and the head of the religion. And he was considered the highest priest and the only connection between gods and human on earth. So, and most of the money or most of the funds of the temple that was coming from the royal family and from the king, from the country, I mean from the treasury house. But what happened during the late period is there was no kings to pay for the priests anymore, to spend money on the temples anymore. So, and that's why the priests gradually became corrupted, and they start introducing new version and new sect in the religion to attract more people. Not only, they start making political compromises with foreign kings to promote for them so they can keep their cuts from the donations which has come to the temple. That was another important reason of the collapse of the ancient Egyptian religion, when the religious authority became very corrupted, and some of them, or many of them, they became they didn't hesitate to make a political compromises with foreign rulers.
So, sir, as we are running out of time, was that the beginning of the real collapse of the army?
Yes, another reason of the collapse as well, which is very important, the increase of hitness. There was the army activities in Egypt during the 19th dynasty and 20th dynasty. They were only focusing on going an invasion. They didn't adapted sons of leaders, and they didn't promote it for relation like Tutmosis did, for example. And that was increasing more hitness, and that was encouraging the foreign nations to align together and take over Egypt when Egypt became weak because of the inner corruption and because of the different foreign rulers.
Yes, but before we wrap up, unfortunately, we have to wrap up our episode. I'd like to thank you very much, Egyptologist and tour guide, Mr. Samir Abbas. Thank you very much for this interview and for highlighting the role of the army in ancient Egypt. And by this, we come to the end of this episode of Breakfast Show. But first of all, I have to thank my colleague and friend, Mahesti Rabia. Thank you very much,
Sasha.
Thank you very much. And make sure to continue following us today on Nile TV International, as we will be bringing more of the inauguration of the Arab-African Summit. Also, to continue following us on Breakfast Show tomorrow with a new crew. Until then, have a good day.